We are going to work on passing an assault weapon ban and making sure that we are protecting women's reproductive rights by expanding capacity and in making the investments that are necessary here in our state to protect women.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin. I'm joined by Jeff Berkowitz as we are going to be reviewing the election results both in Illinois and at the national level. And Jeff, thanks for joining us again. I want to update the audience just briefly on some of the election results as we currently have them. And of course, in a number of states around the nation, election results are still unknown in a very tight race. Let me go back to that. And sorry for that flub, but we start off with a look at the House. 218 is what is needed for the anyone to control the House chamber. The Republicans currently have 211. As we go to the Senate, the Republicans at 49. The Republicans had 50. The Democrats had 50, as you know. Many people think we could end up back at a 50-50 tie the way it looks now, but we still don't know who will control the Senate chamber. And lastly, around the nation, governorships stand with the Republicans holding 24. Among the races we don't know as we tape this is Arizona, where Kari Lake was expected to win. Many people said handily, and at the moment we record this, she is behind with still some 500,000 votes to be counted in Arizona nationwide. So, Jeff, let's begin with you giving us somewhat of an overview. And there's some news as we tape this on the morning of November 11 about some of the House leadership. Maybe we should begin there.
Well, yes. I mean, look, the short of it is that this continues to be a one-party state. We had one-party city in Chicago for a long time. We thought it was a two-party, but the Democrats just blew away everything. Of course, they won all the statewide, and the margin was, for the 4 of the 5 statewide seats, ranged from 9.5% to 10.6%. And actually, the treasurer's race was actually closer than the governor's race. It doesn't matter whether you win by 9.5 or 10.5. And comptroller is like 14-point spread. But the supermajorities were extended. That's actually a little more important. So we went from a House margin of Democrats 73 to 45 to 78 to 40. 78 Democrats. That's what we'll likely have when they start the new session in January. And 40 Republicans. It's a supermajority. They have 7 over a supermajority. And in the Senate, it was 41 Democrats to 18 Republicans. There, the Republicans picked up 1 or 2. It's likely it could be 39 to 20, but there they now only have a supermajority of 3 more. They could lose 3 seats and they'll still have a supermajority. So they lost on the Supreme Court race where the Republicans could have had the majority on the Supreme Court for the first time in modern history in 60 years. They lost both races. We'll come back to that if we have time. It was really stupid that they lost those races. Somebody should be canned for that, okay? Because certainly one, and I believe both, were winnable races. It appears that they're losing on Amendment 1, that is the Republicans, because that's likely to pass. It hasn't passed as we talk. It seems close. So they lost everything. $40 million was spent by Uline for what? For quality ads. Dan Proft did great ads, but the effectiveness was 0. I mean, really, it ends up he was like buying votes.
Well, and the governor spoke about, as he said, 2 mega Republicans spending $100 million. I think he was referring to Dick Uihlein and Ken Griffin.
He spent like several $100 million. The guy spends money like it's water.
I think it was reported that he spent $140 million. Governor Pritzker did on his reelection.
Is that counting the $40 million he spent to pick his opponent? It used to be Democrats just picked their voters. Now they pick their opponents. For God's sakes, would somebody call him out in the media? Or are they all going to just suck up, say, yum, 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 give me more, Governor? Okay.
Before we go into some I want to bring up that Tony McCombie from Savannah, who is there speaking, the blonde state representative, will be the new House Republican leader. That is a change that came out just a short time ago as we tape this, and she will be replacing Representative Jim Durkin, who has been the House leader for some years.
Who jumped before he was pushed, had a disaster. Durkin's a nice guy, but has been a disaster as a House leader. And we should say, we don't know for sure. McComey has said she has the votes. I haven't heard from McLaughlin, who is also going to challenge for that spot. I haven't heard from Tim Bazinga, but it appears you're right. She's claiming she has the votes, as far as take her at her word. But you know what? It's rearranging the seats on the Titanic. What's the big deal? Who runs a caucus that has 40 to 78 for the Republicans? It's a joke. Okay, I don't mean to be disparaging to Republicans, but unless they start now, today, November 11th, and start looking for a good candidate for governor, which they didn't have. You know, Darren Bailey's a nice guy, but that race was never in doubt from the beginning, unless Darren changed his style, which he didn't. So now's the time. It'll take 4 years to get a good candidate. Don't wait and start looking for somebody. And by good, well, we can, like somebody with some verbal dexterity, somebody who can articulate the issues. As you know, Terry, this race should have been won. Education, terrible. Crime, terrible. The economy, terrible. How the Republicans couldn't pick a candidate.
Let me, if I might, on that score, bring in that here, Chicago leads the big city in homicides. What else do we look forward to in Illinois? Well, we can look forward to having the 8th most spending per pupil, and yet we underperform consistently. We also have what? Oh, the second highest property taxes in the nation, just after New Jersey. We have that 2/3 of Illinois property taxes go for K-12 education, and that's the second highest, with the second highest property taxes. And as we also see, only a quarter of all Chicago students score proficient or above the national testing. And so with all of those that could have been issues, the Republicans didn't pick up one statewide election. As you say, they lost seats in the House. They lost the governorship, obviously. They lost the U.S. Senate seat. So the question, Jeff, that some might be asking is the Republican Party dead in Illinois with no statewide wins? And Ken Griffin, one of their big funders, has left the state, moved his business, and moved himself down to Florida. So it seems like people are pulling up the moat and leaving.
The two so-called saviors, billionaires, they screwed the Illinois GOP. Illinois GOP is in much worse shape than they were 8 years ago when Rauner came on the scene. Much worse shape when Griffin came on and he was going to save things. He lost, he screwed up. He had people around him who made a wrong decision. He went along with it. Maybe he even motivated. What does he do instead of correct things? Oh, I think I'll take my bat and ball and go home. My $30 billion of earned net worth. Look, the guy's a genius in terms of the financial sector that he runs, but he certainly, if I were a national person, no matter how much he gives, I wouldn't put that guy in charge of anything politically until he demonstrates he has some knowledge as to how politics works. He clearly does not with respect to what was going on in Illinois. And so is it dead, Terry? Is it dead? No. It could come back. There needs to be a great
Is it a zombie?
Yeah, look, there needs to be a great train wreck. We came close. Sadly, the government in various forms bailed out Pritzker, bailed out the Democratic Party during COVID, and they're going to survive a little longer. Pritzker may get through his 2 terms, okay? But surely this state is going to have a great train wreck. And when that happens, the Republican Party will rise from the ashes and take over. There you go. You heard it here first.
I don't know that you and I will be still alive at that point, because I don't see
it could happen.
I mean, you had, as we just ran through, you had not only all the state issues that we just alluded to there, and that you and I have talked about over the last year, But you, look at the national, with the economy, with inflation. You would think there would have been a lot of voter angst against that. And instead, no, as you've noted, the Democrats pick up seats. And at the congressional level, the Democrats picked up seats. The 13th district flipped from the Republican to the Democrat. Nikki Brzezinski won that. And we also, now we're down to, I think, three
Three.
Republicans, Darren LaHood, Mike Bost, and Mary Miller. Even the 17th, which Sherry Bustos currently has, and was thought that would be won by a Republican, Esther Joy King. No, she went down to defeat as well. So for the Republicans in Illinois, it is a dead zone.
Well, let me just point out on the congressional races, they reasonably could have picked up 5 races. These races ended up being competitive in the 6th. Caston beat Pekow. Pekow should have won that race. He really didn't have funding to do that. And in the 11th, Foster beat out Catalina Lauf. And again, she could have won that. It was competitive if she had reasonable funding. In the 14th, Lauren Underwood beat Greider. Greider could have won that race. In the 13th, Budzinski beat Regan Deering, okay, and she could have won that race. Of course, people said she's an heiress. She didn't spend it like she is an heiress of the ADM fortune. The point is, look, money isn't everything, but it is important. You can't play this game in Illinois, whether we're talking state reps, state senators, congressional races. You can't play this game of politics unless you have sufficient funding and good candidates. We had some good candidates. I shouldn't say we, we're journalists, we're balanced. The Republicans had some good candidates, and but they didn't give them sufficient funding. And they had some barely bad candidates and can't really do much about it. Other than next time get good candidates. We don't have to call them out who they were.
I just had a graphic there, what election results mean, and you're right about the money. I spoke with Regan Deering. She had said that it was hard to get money. She said it was how the Republicans nationally were not giving out any money. I wonder, aside from a couple of deep pocket people like Dick Uihlein, where do the Republicans go for money? I mean, is the base not giving money? I mean, the Democrats seem to come up with sufficient funds, and I don't know if it means that increasingly people in Illinois who might otherwise donate to Republicans have just given up on the Republican Party in Illinois, and if that's the case, one wonders how they can ever come back.
Well, yeah, it used to be in the olden days, maybe 2 decades ago, that Democrats got a lot of their money, not all of it from unions, and Republicans got a lot of their money from the corporate side. The corporate people have gone over, they've either left, we saw the out-migration, you may have put that slide up, maybe you didn't, but tremendous out-migration. So Republicans have lost a lot of the corporate people as they've taken their companies and gone elsewhere. And a lot of them have succumbed to the pressure of the Democrats. If it's a one-party state, why fight these people? Where's Mr. Ricketts? He's got the Cubs. You think he's going to step up and give heavily on the statewide or even citywide? Because, he's got to confront the city Democrats, what they could do to his investment in the Chicago Cubs. He's got to confront what the state Democrats can do to him and his investment. So I don't see the Ricketts family playing, at least in the state of Illinois, a tremendous role in funding. They certainly are nationally. So, look, I'm just saying.
And I will add, as you mentioned here, that here's Illinois graphic on Illinois population shrinks where other states in the Midwest surrounding us have all gained over the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, that is. So it's a little dated, but, the shrinkage of Illinois population, from what I have seen, continues to grow. And
well, we know this, and the Democrats deny it, and our governor denies it, but he doesn't deny that the people who count, who make these decisions, have decided Illinois population continues to shrink as we went from 18 congressional seats to 17. So it's undeniable.
It used to be 22, not that long. I mean,
right. So except for the Democrats. They say Trump and the big lie. We just see every day in the state of Illinois the big lie. It comes from the governor's office. It comes from the speaker's office.
And
It
what is
comes
the
from the
big lie,
Senate
Mick?
president.
What is the big lie?
The big lie is there's no problem here in Illinois. People aren't leaving, Terry. There's no crime. You're just simply fabricating this issue. There's no pension issue, Terry. We can handle it. Just don't worry about it. It'll get better. It's a big, big lie. Well, you've been putting up slides from
And
wire
let
points.
me here's wire points. Total unfunded retirement debt. Hang on, your mic is not on. Total unfunded retirement debt is $530 billion, and you can see the breakdown in the numbers there. So
It's an impossible debt to repay. Instead of amending the Constitution to allow us to restructure benefits, to allow the state government, they're amending the Constitution to give the public sector unions more power to expand it, to say collective bargaining shall not be infringed. They only mean public sector units, but they made a big lie. They just said this amendment applies to private sector as well. Big lie. Anybody with like a fourth grade education in civics knows the National Labor Relations Board controls federally. Federal law preempts state law. Big, big lie. And the media here, the mainstream media, who called him out on it, no, they fact check Trump, but they don't fact check Pritzker. It doesn't happen because they're all wusses. There's no other word for
well,
it.
even
The mainstream
even
media, all wusses.
as Wirepoint pointed out, doing the work of most of the media that doesn't investigate or double check anything, as you just said. Wirepoint pointed out from the floor debate on the amendment by the sponsor of the bill, said on the Senate debate that Senate floor that it only applies to public sector unions. It does not, so they had all the talking points as if this was going to help union workers across the state. It only applied to the government workers.
And they just barely won, if they won as it is, despite the big lie, despite having the mainstream media carry their water for them. And look, as we pointed out, all of these slides we've used are for wire points, and all of them are data based. The education slides, which you put up, and there are many more, they rely on data coming from the Illinois State Board of Education. And what does the governor do? The man who says he believes in science and data, what does he do? He steps out and says, wire points, they're a bunch of grifters. That's what and he says they're a bunch of carny barkers, okay? They're a bunch of doomsayers.
Well, he
This
says
is,
he's the governor that goes by data. Well, there's the data governor right there. Fourth grade math test scores, and you see Illinois in red, far below Florida, which spends a fraction of what Illinois spends on education. And there you got Indiana right next door, almost
well,
as high as Florida. And
yeah, he wants a debate. Why don't we have a debate, Governor? Why don't we put you up there, and then we'll put up DeSantis from Florida, and we can have a real debate with a real moderator, not the morons.
let me
who run
bring
the
it
things
in here that we have there in blue, Jeff. That's see, $9,500 per pupil. That is the Florida number. Illinois is spending $16,600. What do we always hear from the teachers union? We could do better if we had more money. You're already getting a fortune, and this is the result.
also,
They're in red. They continue.
CBS, $29,000 per kid per year, and they've discovered they may have a deficit. Okay, these morons couldn't run a two-car funeral. Okay, and they're running the state of Illinois. CPS is basic. Chicago is basically being run by the Chicago Teachers Union. Well, see, they're vying. Their labor candidates are vying for mayor. So if you get a replacement for Lightfoot, could it be Chewy Garcia? Oh, there's a man who has real reform, right? He would do a lot about crime. He would do a lot about education. He'd do a lot about financials. Give me a break. And if it's not, it's going to be CTU's. The guy they're supporting is lifelong CTU guy Brandon Johnson. Okay, could Paul Vallis, who actually
I was just going to ask, what about Paul Vallis? What are people in Chicago saying about Paul Vallis, and how much of a, at this point in time, it's still early, I mean,
Well,
the
here's the
election
news. Here's the
is
news
kicking
flash.
off, but it's early in the process. And when
So
the vote
Chicago,
is in April, I believe, is for the mayor of
right. Well, it
Chicago.
starts in February. And if in February, nobody of, say, a 14 candidate field gets more than 50%, then they go to a runoff in the top two in April. But the first vote is in February. And what they're saying about Vallis, for a change, he's raised almost $2 million. Never raised more big money before, couldn't be competitive. Will he be this time? I think people are saying yes, he could be one of the contenders.
Well, Vallis is liked, I think, by both Republicans and some Democrats. There's a lot of Democrats that don't like Paul Vallis, but he has run big city education departments. So just to point out for those who didn't know anything about his background, so he has some background. He was an advisor to Governor Quinn, ran as lieutenant governor candidate to Governor Quinn when Quinn lost the election to Bruce Rauner.
Well, he's been making several issues a big issue. He's been willing to speak out on our show, Public Affairs, against the teachers' unions. He's been willing to raise the issue of crime extensively, unlike our current mayor. And he says this has to be dealt with. I don't know whether he's dealt specifically with the Safety Act, but I think I know, or we know, how he'd come down there. So you may have a fresh debate because almost everybody else, there might be another 10 candidates, are on the left. And Ballas says he's a Democrat. We'll take, excuse me, yeah, he is a Democrat. Some people say, for various reasons, they say, no, he's really a Republican. I don't think they can support that. But you can have a debate sort of within the Democratic Party between Paul Vallis, who has some very strong, sound ideas on education, on crime, on finance, and how Chicago should be run differently.
Let me bring up, we
And
have about
we'll see that
7
debate.
minutes to go, just so you know. And we're doing somewhat of a look ahead by talking about the mayor's race here. On the subject of the Chicago mayor's race, what is the thought in Chicago that you can ascertain of the voters for the current mayor, Lori Lightfoot?
Well, about a month ago, there were some polls showing she and Shuey Garcia were running neck and neck, like 25% to
Congressman
24%.
Chuy Garcia.
Congressman Shuey Garcia. So it's hard to believe she would be at 25%. In the initial race in 2019, when they had 14 people in the field, she got into the runoff, winning 17% to Tony Preckwinkle's 16%.
Let me
And then she
remind
beat
people here, as we ran over this a little quick, we got big city. The murder rate in Chicago far exceeds that of New York and LA, and people there are complaining about the crime. We have had rioters up on Michigan Avenue. In other words, a lot of the so-called safe areas of Chicago in the past, people are saying are no longer safe. We have skyrocketing carjacking. We have a decline in the number of police. We've had reports about how people call 911 in Chicago, and a half an hour later, the police haven't shown up because they are so short-staffed now. And
Right.
so my question to you is, as someone who lives in Chicago and covers the politics, what is the feel of the people? Are they continuing to support these policies, or are we at a critical juncture in the voting attitudes of the Chicago voters to say no more? We need to rescue our city.
Yeah, I mean, you have 15% of 11th graders at CPS who are 15% of the black 11th graders reading at grade level. That's coming from our points. On Hispanics, it's about 25%, maybe 40% of whites, which are a minority in that school. So you would think blacks and whites should be up in arms for change. Lightfoot hasn't done a damn thing to help low-income blacks who are attending CPS and not reading at grade level. The governor hasn't done a damn thing as he parades around talking about how we have a high graduation rate. Governor Pritzker, What's the benefit to low-income blacks if only 15% at CPS read at grade level that they're graduating? When is somebody going to ask him that question? When is he going to come on public affairs and defend himself to these issues? Then we'll see some change. And you say, Terry, why isn't it changing? Well, this word is not getting out. The mainstream media are so far
Well,
left.
and this is one thing I would say
This
to the,
message is not getting. It's not getting out. It may happen, and when that happens, and when the population, 2.7 million in Chicago, start getting aware of the facts and the data that we're pointing out from wire points, and when the governor and the mayor stop calling the people who provide data carny barkers, well, then we're going to see some real change, real debate on the issues, on the facts, and things
all
will
right,
get
we
better.
have about 4 minutes left. I want to spend a little time. It looks like the Republicans, they still haven't captured the House. People think they will, although it might be by the slimmest of majorities. But even if they have a slim majority, you need 218. If they came up with 220, a majority of 2, they would still have the committee chairmanships. They control what legislation comes to the floor. And what that means is that the Biden legislative agenda would be dead as far as any efforts to spend more big spending bills. So the other thing we might touch on, since Florida went so overwhelmingly Republican, it's made Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, a big star. And now we're going to be looking at who's going to lead the Republican Party nationally. Is it going to be Donald Trump? Is it going to be Ron DeSantis? Not one Democrat was elected statewide in Florida. So, as one commentator said,
Well,
Florida now looks like
Terry,
Arkansas.
the trend nationally. Look, the Republicans lost Senate seats they shouldn't have lost in New Hampshire and Pennsylvania. You can lay that at the doorstep of Donald Trump for putting forth bad Republican candidates in those 2 states. They may still survive if they win at least one of Arizona or New Mexico, and then win the runoff in Georgia. But this should have been a much easier election. I think Republicans across the country have seen whatever value Donald Trump had, it's over. He needs to get off the stage. And the obvious
I would
guy to
disagree with
replace
you.
him is
I don't think it's the values. People in the Republican Party support Trump's policies. The question is, do we want to? Do the Republicans want to hold on to Trump and all the political baggage he brings, or? And the other thing is two points which are Trump. We got to look at his age as well. The man is now 75, and the election is still 2 years away. He would be 77. So his age is a factor. Plus, he would walk in if elected as a lame duck. You go with DeSantis, he could have 8 years.
Excuse me. He's not going to be
Well,
the
I just want to
nominee.
point out,
He's not going to win if he's the nominee. So it's time for Donald Trump to face reality. It's time for you to face reality. He's not going to be the nominee.
don't tell me
He's
to
not
lie.
gonna win.
I always face reality.
Well, okay. Well, then you'll talk up.
Ron
you'll not
DeSantis,
talk up
I am pointing out, is a
focus
younger
right?
man. He could serve 8 years instead of 4 years. I mean, that's the reality. And if
He's
you're going to,
articulate.
let me talk, if you're going to have a Republican elected to the presidency as a party, you want to have the White House for 8 years, not 4 years before you come back up, and then don't have an incumbent president. We have
In a minute,
we got about
We're
30
running out of
seconds
time.
left.
Okay, so to sum up is that what the Republican Party needs nationally as an observer, not as a participant, we're balanced here, but what they need to win is they need somebody
Make
who
it quick.
doesn't have the baggage of Donald Trump. They need an articulate, a person with verbal dexterity.
And I think they have that
need somebody like Ron. They need somebody
They
like
have it in
Ron
DeSantis.
DeSantis.
The one
last
other
they
thing
need
I
is-
want to get in, we need to have election integrity. We see again in Arizona, this kind of delayed election results gives rise to the conspiracy theories and the ideas that political
Terry,
partisans can steal
Let's just say
elections.
what the
Jeff, we got to
Republicans
go.
need
Say
nationally,
goodbye, Jeff.
They need the Trump followers, but they don't need Trump as running as for
Folks,
president.
we'll see you. Take care.